Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to take a look at the Warcolours Nostalgia 94 paint line based on the old Citadel starter set from when I was a child. To test this, I'm going to paint a Space Marine in a retro 2nd edition colour scheme. So to start with, I'm coming in with the Enchanted Blue and I'm going to put this over all of the power armour. I'm putting some on my wet palette here and thinning it down with a little bit of water so I get a nice smooth consistency to the paint. Now when you're applying this, you want to make sure you only get it to the stuff you primed white, because the coverage to this is quite thin and other colours will show through if you get it in areas you don't want. So I'm applying it all over the power armour. As you can see, it is quite streaky and thin. This is going to take several coats to get good coverage. I'm applying it all over the pauldrons and all over everything else that I want to be this nice bright retro blue. So if you do get it over any other areas, we can come back later and block them in with white again, but try and be neat to save as much blocking in as required. So I've also already put some sand on the base for that classic retro look of those old models from back in the day. So to take your time with this, you are going to need to build up several coats, because as we can already see, it is a very patchy coverage on the first coat. And as after one coat done, you can see an awful lot of that base coat showing through. So I'm going to come back in with a second coat. So just go back over everything you've already done with one coat, come back in with a second coat to build up to that nice, solid, bright blue of a classic ultramarine from the 90s. As you can see, I have been a bit messy in some places, so I will have to come back later with the white and block these areas back in to ensure I get good coverage of the other colours. If you like retro paint jobs, give this model a like, and let me know in the comments below what other models you'd like to see painted up in a retro style. After two coats, you can still see a fair bit of that white primer showing through, so now I'm going to have to come back in with a third coat and keep working like this until I get a solid cover over all of the Space Marine. Although it's a very thin paint, it is really smooth going on. It doesn't leave blotches or lumps or anything. It is a very nice smooth paint. It's just not got the best coverage. So after three coats, it's starting to get there. So one more coat and we should have a nice solid base cover from which to start painting the rest of the model. And there it is after four coats. I think I've got a solid base cover now over all of the blue. You can see it's got a really nice, vibrant, classic blue look to all of that power armour. Next I'm coming in with Chaos Black. This one's a lot stronger, so I'm applying some of this onto my palette, thinning it down with a little bit of water. And now I'm going to catch all of the under armour and all of the cables with a coat of Chaos Black. Be very careful with this, you don't want to get this over any of the blue, or otherwise it's going to take several coats to cover it back up again. So just be nice and neat, take your time and work your way around and pick out everything that we want to be black with a coat of Chaos Black paint. That's all the cables and under armour blocked in. That only took one coat of Chaos Black, because it does give a nice solid cover with just one coat. So now I'm coming in with Skull White. For this, I'm going to block in everything that may have got some blue over it, or some black, just to bring it all back up to a solid cover. This might take two coats, because it's not the thickest of white paints, but does give a nice smooth coverage over everything. So just work your way around, and everything that we don't want to be blue or black, give it a solid coat of Skull White to bring it back to a white cover for all the other colours we'll be applying later. That's everything else blocked in. Took about 2 or 3 coats just to get a solid cover of white over everything. And now I'm coming in with Blood Red, and for this I'm just going to paint the gun casing. See, this paint here is a little bit thin as well. I still thin it with a little bit of water just to keep it nice and smooth. And it will take a couple of coats to get a solid cover all over that gun casing. Obviously be nice and careful here, don't want to get this over anything that we don't want to be red. So that is the rest of the bolt gun that we want to be metallic, or any of the blue, or anything else. Just take your time, work your way all over that casing, and give it 2 or 3 coats of Blood Red. Once again, this is a very nice smooth paint, goes on really, really well. You've just got to build up that coverage in several thin layers. But this is how those classic paints used to work. So they really are doing their job of replicating those old classic paints from the 90s. After 2 or 3 coats, got solid cover on that gun casing. It's really got that retro Space Marine look coming together now. So now I'm coming in with Sunburst Yellow, and for this it's going to be the Aquila and the trim. There's no gold in these starter sets, so in the classic days, everything that is gold now used to be bright yellow. As with a lot of yellow paints, it is going to take a couple of coats. Just be nice and neat, work your way around, pick all of that trim, all of those Aquilas up with a couple of coats of Sunburst Yellow. So once again, take your time, be nice and neat, especially when you're working around other details we've already painted, because you really don't want to get this over anything else and then have to try and bring that back to its original colour. And with all of those details blocked in with a nice bright yellow, there's only one more base coat left to apply to this Space Marine, and that is all of the metal. So for these metallics, I'm coming in with Mithril Silver. This paint here is really thin, and I didn't find it gave the best coverage. You can only really use it on white. Nothing like now where you tend to do metals from a black base coat. You've got to work off of white, and it is going to take you 2 or 3 coats of Mithril Silver to build up that metallic look. So just take your time, make sure you only get this where we want it, and in a couple of thin coats, build up to a solid base cover of Mithril Silver over everything that we want to be metallic. After 2 or 3 coats, got a solid cover of Mithril Silver on all of the metallics on this Space Marine. One last thing, I'm just going to pick out the loading thing on his bolter next to the ejection chute with a little bit of Chaos Black. So that's all of the base covers down. So now I'm just mixing in some of the blue paint with a bit of the black to make a dark blue shade for a pin shade. So this will just come back and forth between the two colours until I get a colour that I want. And then I'm going to thin it down nice and thin. And I'm going to do a recess shade into all of the recesses of the power armour with this. To be nice and neat, obviously you don't want to get this anywhere other than a recess. Just work your way around. Every joint, every fold, everywhere where there's a line, put a little bit of this mix of black and blue to create a shade in all of the recesses. So this is where I would use Nuln Oil or one of the modern day shade paints, but as none of those are in the set and they weren't around in the retro days, but mix your own, make it nice and thin and put it into all of those crevices by brush. So this will take a while, but it's completely worth it at the end. It looks absolutely fantastic. So just take your time and work your way around, giving every recess a shade with this mix. That's all the recesses shaded. As you can see, it's really added some definition to that power armour and made it pop. So now I'm going to edge highlight that armour. So I'm taking some of the Enchanted Blue again and mixing it with some Skull White to create a lighter colour. So just keep going back and forth with the two colours until you get a shade that you want. It's about 3 parts blue to 1 part white, I think. And then around all of the edges to the armour, give them an edge highlight with this mix. So take your time. You don't want to slip and get this anywhere that you don't want. Just work your way around, giving every panel an edge highlight with this Enchanted Blue and White Skull mix. So these paints do mix really well. There's no muting of the colours or anything like that, so you can, using this set, create all of your shades and tones that you will want. I also believe there are more retro colours coming out as part of this line later, so if there is some classic colours that you're looking for, keep an eye and possibly it will come out sooner or later. That's all of the edges highlighted. So it's now the power armor finished. As you can see, we've really added some definition with that shade and highlighting, and he looks like a retro space marine. So now I'm taking some black and some white to make a grey. For this, I'm going to highlight all of the black. So I think it's about 2 parts white to 1 part black, and this creates a nice grey colour to highlight all of the black. So it's the loading case, all of the coils, and all of the folds in his undersuit as well. Catch all of them with a thin line of grey. That's the Under Armour and black highlighted. See, that mix looks really good against the base colour of Chaos Black. So next I'm going to shade the gun. So I'm coming in with some red again and a bit of black to make a darker shade colour for that gun casing. So I think it ends up being about 3 parts red to 1 part black. You just keep going back and forth until you get a shade that you're happy with. And for this, I just run into all the recesses of the gun to give them all a bit of shade. That's the gun shaded, so the next step is we'll highlight that. To highlight the gun, I'm taking some red and some yellow to make a nice orange colour for highlighting that gun casing. It's about a 50-50 mix of the two colours, I think gives you a nice shade. And with this, I'm just running this along the edges of everything to give it an edge highlight of this orange colour we've made. And that's the gun highlighted. It's a nice subtle highlight, but it just brings out the edges of that gun casing. So now I'm going to take some black and really thin this down, because I'm making a black shade to shade all of the metal. So I have this nice and thin. I'm going to run this along all of the Mithril Silver. This is where I really do miss Nuln Oil. So just run this along every edge, every crevice of the metal. It's an old-fashioned black line to add some definition to that metal. Just take your time, you don't want to get this over any of our brighter colours, or you will have to paint them back up and highlight them again. But just work your way around every edge, put a thin line of very thin Chaos Black. I also put some of this into that hole in the gun to make it look a bit deeper. That's all of the metal black lined, and it really does make it stand out and works for both a shade almost and a highlight as well in one step. So now I'm coming in with Flesh Wash. For this I'm going to put it all over all of the yellow. As you can see here, it really does pull, so what I do is put some on the brush and then I dry my brush and I wick it away so it just sits in the recesses and stains all of the yellow a little bit to add some definition to all of that yellow. I only do the Aquillas, don't bother with shoulder pads. You don't need to dull those down, they're nice being left bright. So you have to just apply this all over, wick it away to ensure that some Flesh Wash stays in all the recesses. Yeah, that's the Aquillas shaded. So the next step will be to highlight those back up by coming in with some Sunburst Yellow again. So I'm going to put this on all of the raised areas, leaving the shade in the middle. Because this is nice and thin, if you come in with a couple of coats, you'll be able to build up a transition to the higher points. So you see I'm just trying to catch all of the wings of the Aquila, as well as sort of the head of the skull and all of those areas to bring them back up to that brighter yellow colour, but leaving the shade in the recesses. And then with that yellow brought back up, there's only one thing left to do to finish off this retro Space Marine, and that's to paint his eye lenses. So first of all, I'm coming in with Skull White. Pop this into those recesses for the eye lenses. To be nice and neat, only get this in the lenses where you want. You may take 2 coats to get a solid cover, but ensure you get a solid white cover inside those eye lenses. Once those are painted in, next I'm coming in with some blood red. And I'm going to apply this over that white to give them those classic glowing red eyes. And come back to my orange colour I mixed up. I'm going to put a thin line of this at the bottom of the eye lens to add like a glowing highlight. And then finally, with some Skull White, I'm going to put a dot in the back corner of each eye as a focal point. That is the Space Marine painted up in his retro style, but now we've got to paint a retro base. So, Goblin Green, everyone's favourite classic paint. I'm going to take this and paint it all over that sand that we've got on the base. Now this brings back memories of basing all of my old soldiers like this. So the sand will absorb some of this. Keep it nice and thin to ensure it goes into all the crevices, but be nice and neat around the feet, because you really don't want to paint all of that hard work we've already done. And just give that base a solid cover of Goblin Green and enjoy the memories of Goblin Green while you're doing it. And once that's dried, come in with some Sunburst Yellow. I'm going to dry brush over the top of that Goblin Green to give it that classic look. So be nice and neat again. You don't want to dry brush this over your model. With some Goblin Green, paint the rim of the base. This will take a couple of coats, maybe 2 or 3 to give you a solid cover. Just paint the rim of the base with Goblin Green, and then you've painted a classic Space Marine from 2nd edition. So I do really like these paints. I think they're great fun. They bring back great memories. Yeah, they're quite thin and they take a little bit of time to work with, but they are really great fun and the colours are so bright and vivid. I do recommend anyone who wants to bring back some memories to pick up the Nostalgia 94 paints from Warcolours. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to like and subscribe, and happy retro painting.